Hey, this is Kahja Elliott, Bronx born and raised, ATL made, Bay Area becoming, and this is the As Told By podcast. Welcome back to this week's episode of the As Told By podcast. You all are probably used to me saying I'm on location, and yet again, I am on location, sitting in Atlanta, Georgia, this week with Courtnee Futch, Atlanta-based chef, baker, mixologist, culinary producer, author, podcaster, teacher, who, according to her mission is creating community spaces that empower, entertain, and educate on the joy of food and the self. So, Courtnee, welcome to the As Told By podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for doing it and inviting me to your beautiful home.
Oh, well, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
I figured this would be, a fun little reprieve. We could have a little lunch. We could spill a little tea. We could drink a little coffee,
All those things have happened. So let me just tell y'all, the profile is being raised. The bar is being raised. She did make me a beautiful lunch. And now if you want to come on the podcast, that is a must. We'll work for food. Thank you so much. And I appreciate you taking time to talk with me.
Yes, of course.
So you are an Atlanta native, original peach.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I used to live here for 12 years. I lived in Atlanta, in Gwinnett County.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I've been gone for a while now. Things are very different.
It's a very different place in general.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's shifted.
I'm looking around. I'm like, that wasn't here. This wasn't here. So as a native ATLian, I'm sure it's like not foreign territory, but you definitely can see all of the changes.
Yeah. I grew up maybe 5 miles from here. And I live on Bankhead, for anybody who's like wondering. And I've always talked about that because when my parents split when I was younger, my mom moved up to Kennesaw. My dad stayed near my old school, which was an all-black private school next to the Blue Flame.
Okay.
School called Imhotep, right? Hotep takes on a different context these days, but at the time, Imhotep was like really incredible place. And so, my dad just wanted me to be like close to the school and made life a little bit easier. And so I've always said to people, even though like I primarily lived with my mom, I grew up on Bankhead. Like I have lived all of the early stages of my life here. So to essentially be like 5 miles down the street on nearly the same street is a pretty cool thing, because I've gotten to see the area change and also not change, which I think is a huge blessing. And also I think just like reflective of how the world works, right? Like some things shift a million miles per hour and then some things don't care how you leave them. They will be the same when you come back. And that's been a really interesting kind of perspective for me because I'd always felt at a point as I got older, Atlanta had become a really cloudy, like clout filled place. And, the relationship to celebrity that people have here, and therefore their relationship to art and the industry just look very different. And I think there was a long time where I was like, I don't know if I respect that. Right? Like it was enough to keep me away.
Yeah.
And I was like, if I'm going to go anywhere, like I'm going to go where people are like hungry and they're really getting it. And so I landed in New York for some years, almost a decade, a little bit longer than that, I guess. But I was just like, I don't know if I'll ever see myself coming back to Atlanta. And then work started bringing me back to Atlanta. And I was like, okay.
I miss this.
Yeah, I do kind of miss this. Like that's the Captain D's that I used to drive by when I was younger, or like what is happening on the street where the Blue Flame is, like what's going on?
Is Blue Flame still open?
Oh, child, the Blue Flame's still open.
Ain't going nowhere.
And apparently they have the best lemon pepper wings in Atlanta.
Hey, they all do. All the Blue Flames of Atlanta got the good wings.
So it's been like interesting to come back. I've kind of recontextualized my relationship to it and also come to understand that the external point of view that people have about Atlanta, which is very like celebrity focused, and I think people tend to lean in on the frivolous, is actually not the Atlanta that I have come to know and love in the time that I've been back. It's very earthy, it's very crafty, it's very creative, it's very community driven. And it's very connected, not at all aloof the way that it had kind of been redescribed to me as I was coming of age in it.
Wow. I love what you said because that was so much of my sentiment after I moved out of Atlanta. And people would ask, do you ever want to move back? And I would be like, absolutely not, because it felt like exactly what you described. And I always say, like, Bravo and VH1 did a real number on Atlanta as far as the way it set it up to feel and look. And then it seemed to just become something very different when you have places like Little Five Points, right? That is just a complete different feel, where it's almost like no one really cares that those things are happening. So all the same, the road led you back home.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're native from Atlanta. What kind of food family did you grow up in? Because I know you said your mom moved to Kennesaw, which Bankhead and Kennesaw are two very different things.
Very
if you're not familiar with Atlanta, it couldn't be, more different. So, families always seem to kind of have what I call food personalities. Either it's like make a sandwich and go sit down, or it's like we're doing Sunday dinner, and it's the house where everyone congregates. So what kind of food family did you grow up in?
Oh man. My relationship to food, I think, is defined entirely in compliment to my mom. And my dad is going to hate that I'm saying this, but entirely in opposition to his food style. So I'll describe him first. He cooked like a divorced dad. The stereotypical like divorcee, just like trying to get through. He was doing like one pot meals. And I think he really valued convenience in a way that I didn't realize people could cook like and still make the food taste good. The food was generally good, but it was like I tell this story all the time. I'm traumatized by canned green beans. If I never eat another Frenched green bean again, I'd be too pleased, right?
Oh, at least it was the French cut, the one cut on the bias.
Yeah, but like I was just like, man, like this just, and you could tell vegetables aren't supposed to taste like that, So it was like a lot of barbecue chicken and things he could just like season up and bake or throw in the crock pot before work, and we'd come home and like it would be kind of a quiet, unceremonious sort of relationship with food. My mom, on the other hand, phenomenal cook. Like I put her up against so many of the other home cooks that I know, and where she, I think, wasn't necessarily creative when I was younger, she knew how to build flavor and she could do it fast. Like hers was the house where everybody wanted to gather. Ours, when the parents were still together, ours was the house where everybody was. For Thanksgiving, for Christmas, my mom could bake. Like I got my love of pastry from her. And so it'd be red velvet cakes and German chocolate cakes and pineapple cakes and all the every kind of anything, pecan tassies and all types of stuff. And she would just like pour hours and hours and hours of time into like that. But my mom's a mountain girl from like the Nelson County, Virginia mountains.
Okay.
So she cooks like a meat and potatoes, thick tomboy type of vibe. Like she eats for sustenance, but she could build flavors on top of it and make it taste good. Like corned beef hash was one of her happy go-tos, that sort of thing.
Love that.
Yeah, just like hearty, kind of slow, thoughtful, comforting meals. But if you saw her do them, you'd be like, how'd you build so much flavor in such a short period of time? She's one of those. And she used to dance around the kitchen. And I felt like that was a big thing. I remember that a lot growing up with her, is when she was baking or whatever, like she'd always have music going. She loved Jersey club music, like Jersey house music, because she lived in DC for a long time.
Okay.
And so I guess it just like, that was her jam. She loved it. So yeah, I feel like that informed a lot, because those two dichotomies, when I realized later why my dad was cooking the way that he was cooking, as I got a little older, like closer to 12, 13, I started cooking more at his house, because mom wouldn't let me cook when I was at home with her. Like she would just
she had it locked.
Yeah. And also I think it was like a way of her coming down for the day. Like she was able to like sort through all the things that she had to do. We spent a lot of time together anyway, because I'm an only child. And I think it was just like one of the ways that she felt like she could do her best mothering of me. And it was very evident. And I think one of the ways that I took that trait on was one of the ways I can care back for my dad was by putting a little bit more fun in his food, because I was mad and I was tired of eating it. And then two, because he was really upsetting me. I was like, this is just very bland. There's no love in here. And you could tell. So trying to put like more love in the food so that he also kind of got to feel what I was feeling
Yeah.
in a way. So it was really interesting. Like, I feel like food has always had very emotional origins for me. At least my relationship to cooking kind of was like that. But like, mom was a very like happy, I'm cooking because I love you kind of cook. And dad was like, I'm scrappy and I'm like figuring it out, but I know you need to eat, so I'll try to make it good.
So here's something. So you had that combo of fun and functionality. Sounds like function from dad and the fun and the joy of it from mom. So talk about how that then becomes a career. So two questions. How does that become a career as a culinary producer? And then for people who may not know, and I'm not sure I even know fully, what is a culinary producer?
So I love answering this question because here's the thing. I don't think anybody really knows yet. And I've now been doing it for 5 years formally, and what feels like my whole life informally. But culinary production, culinary producer, think of yourself as like a food media project manager. And so you are organizing all of the components that relate to food for a specific project. And oftentimes those projects are in media. So it's going to be a styled photo shoot, or it's going to be a video project. I think that every single TV show that has a little bit of food in it needs a culinary producer. And that is somebody who is just there to gut check the storytelling and historical accuracy of a food, or its origin, or its relationship to the overall context, story, whatever. So like Game of Thrones, for example, I don't think they have a culinary producer. I have looked. But like when you're seeing the big, pig with the apple in its mouth, is that historically accurate for the time period that they would have been in? Gotcha. And like doing that sort of gut checking, fact checking, which I feel like is really cool. So it starts there, as early in as pre-production as like me figuring out what angles we want to shoot the food from. In addition to, of course, like the storytelling and the story building and kind of the world building that you do around the food. But for something that's like food specific, so not a show like Game of Thrones, but something like The Bear, for example, you are in every single detail of like, what would go into this recipe as it's being shown on screen? When they're actually taste testing it, can we make sure that we add some more salt to it? Because the pinch that we need to show on camera might not be the pinch that's actually required to make the food taste good when it's being eaten. And there are all of these like little details that you kind of have to hold in your head about how actual cooking is happening when people are doing it in their homes or in their restaurants, so that it tastes accurate. And so that's a lot of like what you're thinking about. But what I'm thinking about, because I consider myself more of like a culinary director than a producer, is what does the food look like when it's on camera? If my chef is left-handed, we have to change the whole way that we are portraying their food to the camera, so that all of the camera angles are like seeing the food, so that it's not blocked by their hand as it's chopping something. So it's like shot lists, it's grocery lists, it's managing a food stylist and a PA. So usually your culinary producer is more senior than the food stylist who's on set.
Okay.
It's also coordinating with the prop stylist if the CP is not the prop stylist, because sometimes we also are. It's making sure that we have the right bowls, the right pots, the right pans. Will the oven come up to the proper temperature? So you are like the grand poobah of the kitchen in a way, as you were just helping, kind of pull this production off. Oftentimes after that, we are just responsible for food safety, for food styling if there is no food stylist on set, making sure that there are doubles of components that are coming into the scene. I'll give you an example. I was just on set out in LA last week or 2 weeks ago, and we were doing a branzino dish, like a fried branzino. So we had 8 fillets that were there. We cooked 2 on camera. We want that to happen in real time. When we show the branzino again, there's 8 pieces. Well, my talent didn't fry up all 8.
Okay.
I go in, I fry up the other 6. I make sure that they're all like equally seasoned, that they're gorgeous. I plate them up. So I'm really doing a lot of the cooking also behind the scenes. Okay. And then bringing that in so that the talent can show it as their final meal. So oftentimes what talent is cooking, there's very few exceptions to this. Or there are a few exceptions to this, but most of the time, everything that you're seeing on screen is being cooked by the culinary producer. And then the talent is just showing the steps of how it's being created.
Okay, so this is fascinating, right?
Yeah.
This, food styling is one of those things that I always was so taken by, because it's the magic behind what you think you see that you didn't really see. But if I am understanding you correctly, there are all of these logistical specificities around how you see what you see. Like you mentioned, the down to the nuance of left-handed, right-handed. Would that have fit in with, the time in which this was being shot? So, look, I'm glad I asked you that question, because it was far more than what I thought it was. I just saw you with Morris Chestnut recently, and I was like, oh, her job is lit. But yeah, it's a lot of detail. And, that does make me think about this conversation that we're starting to hear a lot about. Really have been hearing it, but I just saw like a big conversation going around about it on Threads. And it's this talk about formal culinary training not being the only path, but there still being value to it. Right. And whether you train here or you train abroad, and I know you've had some experience with training abroad as well. How do you think the experience of getting like that formal training and particularly a more global perspective informs what you do?
That is such a great question. So I think that what I realized, and I'll tell you that as recently as like May of this year, I was actually thinking about going to culinary school. So my education has been pretty like, I guess, standard education. And in the background of all of that has been my desire to just be in the kitchen. And like, you weren't going to take me out of the kitchen. But I'd always felt like, and my parents had prioritized for me, like, go and get, your 4-year degree. I went to Syracuse. I got a degree in comms, and then I came after that, and I really wanted to do it in hospitality, but they had just rolled back the program. And I considered transferring to Cornell so I could be in the hospitality school, but they weren't giving no money for real. And so, at that time, I just had a very scrappy relationship to, one, entrepreneurship, and then two, food. Well, I guess food first, which is I started baking kind of like my mom had baked, and it paid my way through school, which was really incredible. And then, like, at one point it was pulling down like 6 figures a year, and I was like, this is really great. I love this for me. And pastry, I think, was just like home for me. And I was really able to like lean in with, I'm at that point, I'm not even 21, and I've got like 5 or 6 years of deep pastry experience. I felt like I had some gaps that I wanted to fill, but the main gap that I wanted to fill was actually in the savory space. I was like, I can cook well, but it was all like Southern kind of soul food cooking. And I was like, but there are so many other things that I want to go and learn. So how do I go and learn those? And when I came out of grad school, I got a job working for an ingredients distributor. I won't name names because they were problematic.
Okay.
But I got a job and was working pretty much immediately in the food space, but in sales to restaurants. And part of the perks of that job is that they send you to France, and you're there for like a month and some change.
Oh, nice.
And you are learning from their executive chefs who they're partnered with out there. And because I had all this background in pastry, they made sure that they put a lot of emphasis on pastry for me at that time. So I had like so much 101 training with some of the best pastry chefs in France, just like through relationships that they have, which was really, really cool. I learned ice carving. I learned how to make my own ice cream. Invert sugar is like a thing I'll never use again, probably, but like I was using it very deeply for like weeks at a time while I was there. And it was because I was working for a French fruit puree company, and they really felt like having pastry experience would be valuable when I'm going in to talk to other pastry chefs. And they wanted me to know how to do things like entremet and, patisserie and all of these things. And I was like, yeah, this is great. So they paid for that. They also paid for me to get my mixology license.
Nice.
Which is pretty cool. Love that. And that was actually what got me like really into the cocktail space pretty early. I was just at that point able to drink. I was 21. I was just able to drink, and I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm in France. I'm drinking cocktails. This is lovely. I love this. And I think that is something, you hear people talk about it and you understand it as a privilege, right? Like to be able to kind of buck the traditional systems and like go pursue extracurricular learning is a privilege, luxury, right? Like I recognize it as that. I'm so grateful even though my experience with that company was not the best, what they gave me was the kind of confidence and backbone to say, I am skilled in what I think I'm skilled in, and I've refined this particular skill, and now I'm ready to see what other skills I have. I think the depth in which I had learned pastry would have remained a question mark for me. Or had made me, I think that I would have felt like there was still so much more to learn in that space had they not kind of filled that gap for me. So then it was like, well, now I just want to figure out how I learn more about savory food and like what sort of cuisines do I love. And my time in France also introduced me to a lot of the French food that I love cooking today. So like Afro-French fusion, really one of my jams. I love it so much. Afro and or like Southern, because I really love the intersection of like Southern American cuisine with Southeast Asian cuisine. And it's like really very fun. I used to do a dinner series called Trap Soul, Seoul.
Okay.
And it was just like my way of kind of playing around with, you know, like deep umami and all of these things. But dinner parties really kind of were the education that I could afford to do at the time. Okay. And it was a very scrappy sort of thing. I was like, I want to make a little bit of money, but you never do dinners for the money. Any chef will tell you, you never do dinners, you never do events for the money, because that's not where the money is at. But
not where the money resides.
You know, where the money resides, where the money resides. But wasn't no money residential over there. And I had to figure out like, I want to learn this thing. I can't take time off right now to go to culinary school. And so I'm just going to have to figure out how to do this myself. Yeah. And it was always like a self-education. Like I would come up with a theme. I'd do a bunch of research about the sort of meals that fit under that cuisine. And then I would attempt to execute them. Or I'd go to restaurants in New York with whatever extra money I had after paying all my very expensive New York bills. And I would try to re-engineer the recipe once I got home. And I learned so much about like cool ingredients that way. Like my education was just like a very like, I want to try it sort of thing. But it wasn't until I think late last year, where I looked up and I said, everything that I've learned for the most part has been something I've had to teach myself. How much better would I be if somebody else taught me? And I was kind of having what felt like an existential crisis. I'm not going to hold you, right? Like I was maybe a year and a half removed from doing any deep culinary production work. I had left New York. I'd moved to Charlotte for a period of time.
It's a fun food city.
It's a fun food city, but I will say this, the industry for food creatives isn't there the way that it is in a New York or in LA, or even in Texas, like in Austin. It's a lot easier to kind of like find your community and find like fun ways to stay plugged in with the work or the space when you're in a city that like really values food that's not just hospitality. What I will say is I think Charlotte and Atlanta have the same approach to food, which is actually hospitality first. Like it's more entertainment based.
Okay.
Hospitality than it is like food driven and cuisine driven experiences.
I got you.
You know what I mean? A little hookah lamb chop, no shade to the girls, but a little, and that's what I felt like was kind of, it felt very prevalent, at least in the Black food spaces. And I was like, I am looking for something richer and more robust. And I'm like just a couple degrees removed from the sort of work that I used to do every day. Yeah. And I had like shifted careers again. And now this time I'm like, full-time entrepreneurship. I'm focusing on my food content, all of the things. And I think I was just like missing the validation. Yeah. I think I can be honest about saying that, but I was missing the validation of like, okay, I've gotten all these stamps, but nobody knows that I have these. I should go get my next one. It's kind of like the when Black women get bored, we go get another degree type of thing. And I was feeling, I think, that. So now I'm having to like rejigger my relationship to this whole thing. And I really thought about it. I was like, I'm going to go get my master's in culinary arts. I applied at CIA, or I started the application at CIA, and then I started talking to them, and they were like, we think you'd be a great fit if you really want to do this, but I don't think you really want to do this. And I'm like, you know what? I think you're right. I don't really want to do this. So I look at another program at CIA out in Napa, at the ACAP program, which is
that property is gorgeous.
It's absolutely stunning. We were just out there in May, and I walked in and I was like, this is really beautiful, but I don't think I feel anything. I came back like right after that trip in the kitchen with Morris Chestnut. Right. So like
that beats CIA. I would take that over CIA.
You know what I mean? Most girls would, but also I think that there was, I just needed to get back in the field. Right? Like that was what it was. Like I was just missing the work. And I had been out of the work for so long that I felt like, well, school will fill the work gap for me, and nothing fills the work gap, at least in my relationship to it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing that it's come up often this season of the podcast, but it's just something that I've been, thinking about even in my day job circles. It's like being at jobs or in a space in your career that is not really resonating with you, but being able to leverage the brand of where you're working, or being able to leverage the offerings of where you're working, and also not pigeonholing yourself with a thought or a belief system that if I don't have X training, then I can't do this. Because some of this is trial and error. You can be self-taught. I just think there's so much value in both. Yes, if you're self-taught, you may not be able to make pâte à jus. However, there's plenty of other things you can do, like when you talked about the concept of the dinner series you were doing. And we definitely are going to talk about that more, because I saw that you have one coming up. So I want to hear more about that. But even in the things that you kind of laid out that come with being a culinary producer, and then some of the work that you've done that you just talked about. And in my research, I saw that you had kind of been connected at a point to doing some work with Food Network, which I think is interesting because there seems like chefs have so much access to that platform now, right? You turn on Chopped, there's like 80 episodes that come on back to back, and each episode it's got 4 chefs. Sometimes I turn it on and there's people I know or people who, are local to the Bay Area. We see so much of that competition themed cooking. And I was asking a couple of episodes back, Chef Rogelio Garcia, who had been on the 15th season of Top Chef, to kind of demystify what those things are actually like on the back end. Because here you are with all this skill, right? And then you have to produce something in minutes that usually takes hours, and planning. And here you are, you open a basket and you have to very quickly on the fly come up with ABC. So when you have that skill set and then you're in these kinds of environments, what's the gap or the lack of a gap or the connection, the experience really between the two?
Yeah. So, it's funny. I will say that I think folks who do best in competition spaces are folks who have at some point in time worked in a restaurant. And the degree to which they've worked in the restaurant space, varies, I think, per person. But I think something I've never had to do was cook quickly. That's not my relationship to food. I like slow. People have heard me say this time and time again. I am a slow and thoughtful cook. I like things to simmer. I like them to braise. I like them to roast. I like them to caramelize. I like them to soften. And it is hard to produce that sort of intensity of flavor in a short period of time, especially when you don't know what the ingredients are beforehand. I think that tells me I'm not built for a competition type of show that's under 30 minutes. And it's just, you show up the one time and you do the thing. So what I learned from my time doing that one competition show, which again, I will say I will likely not do again, because I think my personality and approach to food just doesn't align with the sort of quick turnaround time that makes for great television in that way. But if I were to do something like, I think about the barbecue showdowns and, the multi-episodic, sort of series of it all, I'm like, yeah, if we had 4 hours to do a challenge, I'd bust out something insane. So I think that works for me. Where I think other chefs who have done an incredible job, somebody who comes to mind for me all the time is one of my girlfriends, Chef Sticks. Brittany Sticks, Brittany Williams, yeah. So Chef Sticks is right now on Chow House, which is another Food Network competition show, and they fly everybody out to Italy, and you do all the things, and it's kind of like you get eliminated from the house through a series of like cooking challenges. She's built for this, right? And I think that one, she is used to distilling her food, like her thoughts on food and her point of view on food, down into something very tangible very quickly. I think partly that training can come from the restaurant space, but also her relationship to food is such that like she is a private chef, but she is like, in my mind, she's a chef's chef.
Okay.
Like she is a chef's chef, right? Like she really gets down, and she gets down and moves through her thinking process so quickly. And then you see it just distilled out into something, and she's like, cool, like boom, this is what we're going to do. And I think that partly the piece that you can't get from anywhere else, but probably restaurants, is the need to react and to respond correctly the first time, right? So correctly, accurately, and then quickly. And that's just something that I kind of never had to hone. And I was like, well, maybe I'm at that point in my career where like I should go and like get this training. But even culinary school will not get you restaurant training.
Right.
I've heard so many chefs say, especially when I brought it up to my friends who are also chefs, like, girl, I'm thinking about going to culinary school. And they're like, bitch, why? Why would you do that? Just go stage. Like, just go like be a line cook somewhere, and like you'll learn what you need to learn. And I'm like, yeah, but like I feel like will I struggle with that? And they were like, no, like you'll either pick it up or you won't. And I think that that's the energy that a lot of really good chefs have, is like you'll either get it or you won't get it.
Yeah.
And it's okay if it needs to be refired, and it's okay if it needs to be, redone or whatever. And I have to clean up the sides of this plate because I messed up the splatter on the sauce or whatever. But like, there's nothing that's going to stop their desire to execute. And I think for me, it's like, I want my conditions set for me to execute.
I need to know what I'm walking into.
I need to know what I'm walking into, but I think that's also like my little bit of my personality thing is like, I love logistics. I like to be in the weeds. I want to know what's happening. I think it's what makes me a great producer, but would probably not make me a good sous chef.
I can see that. I understand what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like, I need the whole thing thought through. And I need to know what's happening before it starts so that I can communicate to other people what is going to be going on. But if I feel like I'm getting caught off guard in like the middle of something, it frazzles me to a point where I'm like, it's got me second guessing my skill set. And my skill set is not something to second guess.
Okay, then. She's like, I got what I got. And to know what your culinary perspective is. Like, I'm a slow burn girl. I'm not going to be, I can't open the basket and give you 30 minutes of an entree. I mean, I could, but it's not going to be my best work.
Exactly.
Okay. I mean, what I love as I watch a lot of those programs, even outside of the Food Network, like the Next Level Chef and, the other things, I love how much representation I see on the show, because that was not always the case.
Yeah.
Right. At the time, Food Network, there were hardly any Black folks or, just any non-white folks. And so it's good to see all this representation. Boy, I mean, it's everybody you could think of cooking every kind of food, or the specializing in every kind of food you can think of coming through there, which, makes me think about just where we are in this societal moment with all of the attacks on DEI initiatives. I know you and I talked about that a little bit before we got started, but with those attacks on DEI initiatives having a center stage moment, and of course with the looming election in just a couple of months that we have no clue how that's going to evolve, what specific impact do you see that having within the food industry?
I think it's already having it. I think that because to have a conversation about one thing means we're kind of secretly having the conversation about all things, which is that the rollback in women's rights, the rollback in economic equity, the rollback in, people's just like agency and racial equity, and like all the work that we'd kind of done, and work that had been ongoing, and I think just came to a head in 2020, but like the work had been happening for years. And up until that point, it didn't feel like any of it was enough to kind of push the needle for, and my emphasis is always going to be on like food media, right? But like Food Network falls under food media. And the way that there was just a dearth, like an absolute absence of what felt like robust Black voices. And I'm saying this as someone who is also a plus size, dark skinned Black woman, where I felt like the only representation I was really seeing of Black women also looked like plus size and dark skinned Black women, but there wasn't enough of, mixed race folks, or there wasn't enough of, people who have, Caribbean heritage, or there wasn't enough from the diaspora. And what I felt like I was starting to see was a lot of solely American soul food, right? Like just Southern food, and that was it. And I'm like, there's a lot more to our stories than that. Yeah. And so the way that we would get kind of pigeonholed was something that I think always kind of a little resentful of, if I can be honest. And even when I did Chopped, that was what they tried to smush me into. And I was like, I have so many other food interests. Like, I have this really deep love for Southeast Asian cuisine, and you've never asked me about it. And you've got me up here like doing pecan crusted fried chicken with whole pieces of pecans. So one, you can't even cook your chicken at temp with such large pieces of nuts around them, but that's neither here nor there, right?
You went to your technical skills. It was like, this is not working.
This is just not working. But I'm like, okay, whatever, fine. So when you're kind of thinking about that, it really does start, I think, one, from the very beginning. Who is in the room and making decisions about casting? Who is in the room? Who is producing who you're casting? Because that also ensures that we end up with equitable stories. And as we've seen the rollback, maybe we're just now starting to see the presence of these people in the front, but not much has changed in the internal just yet. I am one of 6 Black culinary producers in all of America.
Really?
One of 6.
Okay.
3 years ago, there was 3 of us. There was 3 of us. Okay. It's abysmally small. Now, I love that for us a little bit, right?
Well, it does help.
It does. It's a little cool. But I do think that there's something to having people in the room who are going to also make sure that you are represented well. I don't want to always come on TV and see a sassy Black woman. I don't want to always come on TV and see, a queer person as being, characterized as flamboyant. I don't want to always see, these kind of stereotypical storytelling moments. So it's a Black man, so he's got to talk about how he's come from hardship. We live soft lives. I want to see different types of representation. And I think that also means that inside of the institutions of these companies, and Food Network is an institution, yes. Food 52 and Bon Appetit and Condé Nast and all of them, they are all institutions. And so it requires that the inside of the institution and the talent that they're paying to reflect the institution, even for entertainment, are in agreement about what equitable and, diverse and inclusive representation actually looks like. Because I think that when you start stripping down the storytelling to just like, oh, well, we've got the faces in the room, but we're not telling their stories in beautiful and thoughtful ways, or we're not accepting critique about the way that we, produce a foodie con and only have one Black person of all the 16 people that you have on stage, and he himself is not even necessarily a chef. Right? What does that say to people about what you are doing to roll back our presence? And did the stories stop becoming valuable?
We talked about a post 2020, 2021 environment where it's like, what happened? What happened? What do you think are some solutions for that?
The thing is, I think entrepreneurship, has been one of the better solutions to, and entrepreneurship isn't for everybody, but entrepreneurship, I think, as a function allows for more independent production of how stories are getting told. And yes. I think that there is a lot of value in that. When we realize that institutions are not kind of meeting us appropriately in the work that they should be, one, holding them to task is, I think, huge, right? Speaking up about these things and not being afraid of the opportunities that will or will not come your way as a result of being more vocal. It's something that even recently I felt like I have had to do more of with my platform. I have watched a lot of things. I write my letters. I try to join the judging panels when I can to make sure that there's somebody who is rooting for us and for every story in the room, but making sure that our stories are not getting passed over is a way to kind of quietly check for equity. But I think quiet isn't enough anymore. And for all the work that we've done so out loud and then to be kind of shushed slowly but surely, they're hoping that we're quiet. Institutions need us to be quiet, but I don't think that is helpful. I don't think it's helpful. And I think entrepreneurship in some ways, when you're not directly tethered to the demands of an institution, for example, right now, I am not. That is beautiful for me. Yeah. So as I'm building out my culinary production company, I'm very thoughtful about, what stories do I want to tell? And also, whose stories do I want to protect?
That's a good question.
Which is an interesting thing, right? I know very clearly whose stories I want to protect. I never want Black women to experience the things that I've experienced coming up in food media. They're the first people that I'm thinking about. It doesn't mean that I'm not thinking about everybody else, but I feel like when you do the work of protecting Black women, you do protect everybody. And so that is, that's kind of like my charge in this space. But I think like holding brands and institutions accountable, taking your dollars away from those institutions and brands when necessary. Obviously money speaks, right? So we should all
your
be
wallet.
Right. So that's something that we should always just feel comfortable, I think, with doing, because they need us too.
Yeah.
And so it's not just a one-way oppressive relationship, but it can be oppressive, right? It's a transactionally oppressive relationship, but it isn't just one way.
Yeah.
And I think we have to be mindful about that. And I think that the other piece is like, that means that creatives have more work to do, which is that we have to tell more of our own stories. It's the piece that I think is maybe the most annoying, because it's like, damn, okay, we got to put more of this stuff on our shoulders again. I've had this on my shoulders the entire time. And it's like, yes, you have, my love, but you weren't sharing it, right? And so we have to fight a little harder to show other people what we've always known, which is that the work that we do is so valuable.
Yeah.
And you cannot take it away just because you don't see the value. I can give two shits about how you see my value, right? But I see it. And so I'm going to like march toward the execution of that thing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but I will say that the last piece is we have to figure out where the real funding sources are for the sort of creating that we want to do.
That's important.
It's really, really important. And I think it's been the hardest part of entrepreneurship, particularly in this season, because it's not like all the money went away. But a lot of the money, the way that we were used to getting it, did go away.
Okay.
And so I think we have to figure out new ways of being scrappy. Like I am thinking about like grants and what are some other like quieter partnerships that I could like have kind of going in the background. I'm using my work as a content creator to fund my other work as I build my business, and where people might want me as Courtney for one thing, they might not want the Maillard for this other thing. That's okay. The money's gonna move either way, right? And so just being like ready for that and kind of thinking in a more treating the money like it's communal.
Yeah.
And
the
sort
work.
of way. Yeah. And the work is also communal. Like I'm helping a girlfriend right now. She has a physical studio space down here in Atlanta. And she doesn't have a lot of bandwidth right now. I'm getting ready to have a baby. I'm like, I got bandwidth right now. I don't have a baby. I will help you. Like, what sort of things do you need? But I think this actually brings me back to a great point, which is about community, and how not needing things doesn't make you a better community member.
No, it does not.
And I'm having to learn that the hard way too, which is like, I'm so used to figuring everything out on my own, but by not letting people help me, I'm actually being anti-community. And so you have to tell people what you need, and then tell them how they can help you get you what you need. And I'm realizing that is also that's going to be the thing that changes my life this year. I'm convinced. But as you're doing the work, gut check with other people about the work that you're doing. Ask them to review it. Spend time, make a dinner, have people over. Something that we do at I'm pointing at the dinner table right now for those of y'all who can't see.
Table.
It's a very cute table.
Yes.
But we do a dinner called Office Hours. And me and my fiance, and we'll just like have a couple of friends over, and they'll either be in business or they'll be creatives. Almost decidedly, we haven't had anybody who's also in the food space yet. And I think that's just because the needs are a little different. But we get creatives and people in business together, and we bond at the table. And at the end of the dinner, we ask everybody, what do you need? And nobody gets up from the table until somebody at the table has gotten what they said they needed.
I love that.
And I think it just, it encourages us to keep asking for shit, right? I think it's easy to forget because, everybody's got something going on, but also everybody has something that they can contribute. And I think that is, at least briefly and in our small little community building way, is how we can kind of get over the institutional hump of what's happening right now in the DE&I rollbacks.
Yeah. I love what you had to say about community. Earlier this season, I recorded an episode with KJ Kearney, and he said community is a verb. It's not something you have, it's something you do. And that stuck with me.
I love
KJ.
KJ.
KJ's the best. But I agreed with that, and that really has stuck with me all season long in all of the other conversations about community being something that you actually do. It is transactional, and I think transactional gets a bad rep. There is transacting to be done in community, so I agree with that. And you mentioned in that your fiance.
Yeah.
Courtney is engaged and smack dab in the middle of wedding planning, and I'm sitting across from her. I'm looking at her beautiful ring. Is this Asher cut?
No, it's what is this? Radiant.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yes. So you are a girl who loves all things love and romance.
I do.
You also, in addition to all of your, hands-on culinary endeavors, you are the creator of Love and Butter, which, as you describe it, is an exploration between the culinary space and the pursuit of love. So where did you come up with that correlation between those two things?
Oh my gosh. I think that I knew food as love before I knew love as love. Like, food has always been the way that I understood either the presence of love or the absence of it, right? Like, kind of taking it all the way back to like my parents. Like, as a child, I think you see a lot. As an only child, I think you see a little more. And there are no blinders between you and the adults in your life. And so because I've always been, I think, one, I'm a highly sensitive person. Like, I was a highly sensitive child. Anything would and could, make me cry. I could be thrilled and I would just burst into tears. Like, anything that was going on with me, I felt it very, very deeply. And I also felt it from everybody else very, very deeply too. And my dad reminded me very recently, quite embarrassingly, over dinner with Femi, that I used to stand at like the edge of the basketball court at my school, and kids would like line up and wait to come and talk to me about their problems. And we'd do 2 laps around the basketball court, which is crazy.
Were you Lucy from Peanuts? Did you have like a
I should have
stand?
had like
the
a
doctor
stand.
is in.
I should have had like a little lemonade stand and made some bread. But man, if I had a nickel. But I would just we'd do 2 laps and then I'd come and get the next kid and we'd talk about whatever was going on at home with them. And like, I just had all this capacity. And eventually where it started to translate was into food. But I had like a really deep desire to understand people's relationships to each other. And I'd always said that if I wasn't doing this, I'd be a marriage and family therapist. Like, it's always the thing that I knew I wanted to do that the same way that I knew I wanted to cook. But I was like, okay, shout out to the marriage and family therapist, but I think I might be a little bit more of a capitalist and I need money. Like, I
get paid.
I need funds. So I was looking at social work first, and then landed in comms, and I was like, there's probably space to hold all of these things together. And then food kind of became the vehicle for that. But I saw food as healing. I saw food as an apology. I saw food as an I'm trying. I saw food as I just failed. And having seen it that way so intensely as a kid, as I started to get a little older, it was interesting to me the way that I would then use food to translate myself to people. And so I call food like my great translator. Like, if there was anything you ever wanted to know about me, like, have a meal with me and you've got some insight. And I just never didn't see it like as a part of love. But I think what I also started to realize is there was a point in time where in my romantic space, the way that my love was showing up was exclusively, I felt like, in food, and that was being taken for granted. And I hated that feeling. When food became an expectation that either previous partners had of me or that friends had of me or whatever, I noticed the way that it changed my whole relationship to food. And so I stopped cooking for like years, unless it was for somebody else. So I was eating cereal and pizza and, whatever other foolishness during that time. But because my relationship to food is emotional, but my relationship to eating is not emotional, which is interesting.
That is an interesting point. The relationship to food is emotional, but not eating.
Right.
Okay. You like the process.
I like the process.
Yeah.
Like, I'm such a process person. So I was like, I don't really care what I eat for real. Like, I was very detached from it. And I was like, I don't think I'm supposed to feel like this. Like, I think I want to be reminded of something good when I'm having a meal that I have made. I'm tired of making other people feel things with my food and they don't see me. And I think from that frustration was kind of me having to sit with, one, what I was no longer willing to do for people who made it a point to misunderstand me. And then two, how do I get back to a point of not misunderstanding myself through this food? And so with Love and Butter was kind of born from that sort of space. And I think while I was going through my singleness journey and then into my dating journey, and the various ways of that heartbreak kind of shows up in that time, it wasn't always other people breaking my heart. It was mostly me, right? And like me looking back at my relationship with family and looking back at the expectations I had of love and being like, damn girl, you really set yourself up with some weird expectations on that one. And then cooking my way back through it, or stopping at McDonald's and having a French fry. I barely eat McDonald's French fries anymore. No shade to McDonald's, I love them. Because I used to be a huge quarter pounder girl with cheese, extra onion. I'm not trying to kiss nobody after that. But I would stop and like get French fries and like talk to my close friends at like 2 a.m, sitting in my car, like phone propped up. And it got me really comfortable talking about my feelings over food. And that was where it started. And I was like, you know what? I've got this thing. I have this urge to kind of tie in these other themes about love in my life with food, and I want to relate to people kind of through it. So with Love and Butter, essentially held kind of 4 parts, which was 1, some sort of introspective, I don't know, musing, or essay, right? Because they started as essays. I was writing them, and then I was like, now I'll read them. But it's like an introspective essay about like whatever I felt like I was learning from love at that point in time. Like one of my favorite episodes is the intimacy of handwriting. I believe it's episode 3 on the pod. And it's all about how my love of loving people's handwriting started with my mom and how she used to write all of her recipes down, and my dad and his perfect engineering penmanship. They write in a very specific way, which is like all capital letters that kind of looks like the papyrus. Yeah, and it looks like the papyrus font on Microsoft, which I think is really cool. And how like that just kind of informed the way that I love to be written to, and also like love to write to people. And then where did food kind of come into that, and what does that have to do with my relationship to romance? And how did that show up across different relationships or different dating scenarios or whatever? And it was such an introspective sort of moment for me to kind of go back to the origins of myself and go, oh, that's where the love started. Oh, and that's where the food kind of joined along the way. And like now I'm taking this and I'm translating it into something else. And I would do a recipe pairing, and a cocktail pairing, and a wine pairing, and a song pairing.
Oh,
so it's like all
that's
of that.
Fun.
It's all of that. It's really fun. And I think it was just keeping me grounded for a while, because I have ADHD. I've always struggled with memory. I can either hold on to every detail of a memory or nothing about the moment at all. And at a point, I think post-COVID, I really, really struggled with it. And I was like, so if I don't put these things down the way that I felt them so strongly, I would lose them, and I'd forget all the best parts of myself before I get to become the next best part of me. And I just kind of didn't want to sacrifice that. So it felt really urgent to put all the things into a pod at that time. It also felt kind of fun and petty and a little salacious to like be talking about my dating life, especially after I'd left corporate. Because then I was like, nobody's in my business.
Right.
I can talk about these things like as freely as I want to. I gave people nicknames. It was fun because I knew it wasn't harmful, but it was freeing in the sense that I got to be just a girl talking about the things that me and all my girlfriends talk about.
The group chat.
The group chat. Like it's just taking the group chat and like literally dropping it into, video form where like everybody could see it. So I'm curious now about like what I will do with the pod in like this particular place in my life. I want to be doing more dinners with people. I want to be talking to people who are in food about their relationship to love. And I feel like that's like the next best place for me to go. Cause also I don't want to keep talking about me and my man. You know what I mean? I love us.
Right. So we good.
We're good. But like, it's almost like it's a boring kind of happy after a while. And I'm like, I don't want to have to justify that this feels really good. You know what I mean? Like this is what I've kind of done all this work for. And to protect our privacy, to protect my damn peace. I don't really care to keep talking about it like that, but like we're here, the conversations are there. I love that for us. I've never hidden. I don't hide. But I just don't have a desire to be to have all of my love stuff sitting at the forefront, I think, anymore. And so I'd like to see what it's like to platform some other people and learn from them about what their experience in love kind of looks like. Because we all have such interesting stories, right? Like food and love, they're never divorced. They're always married. So like, what does that look like? I want somebody to tell me about theirs.
I'm sure you'll have plenty of takers. People sit around a beautifully appointed table, eating amazing food, talking about their love life. You will have lines, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You do dinner parties. You have one coming up.
I do
later this month.
I do.
Yeah.
So it's part of my brown butter. It's the second installment of my brown butter summer series. Anybody who knows me personally or impersonally knows I adore brown butter. It's my favorite ingredient. It was actually in the Caesar salad dressing that I made.
Was it?
Yeah. I love brown butter. It's just so toasty and delicious and warm and like just liquid gold, and I love all that. But I wanted to do just a fun summer series, kind of get people together, do the community thing, and kind of have it in an intimate sort of space. Intimate is relative because it's about 35 people. But this next installment is on August 24th. It is titled Sweet Smoke. So this one has a new theme. Every dinner will have a new theme. The last one was Bitter Peach, and it was kind of like dark Southern Americana food. So it's the way that like my brain goes to interpret jazz and folk and blues, but in food form. And I wanted it to kind of hold space for that in like the gritty context of being Black in America right now, but without the heaviness. Yeah. So that was dinner number one. Dinner number two, Sweet Smoke, is us exploring the Maillard reaction. Y'all might have heard me mention that my culinary production company is called the Maillard, which is based on the browning reaction that makes all food delicious. And it's kind of like my also quiet, like it's, know who this is for, right? Like it's the browning reaction, I think, speaks to something very specific. But it's all about the Maillard reaction and exploring fire and what it leaves behind. So caramelization, roasting, braising, smoking, bruleeing, torching, browning, all of the things. And I'm really excited about it because this is my favorite type of cuisine where everything feels slow cooked and thoughtfully approached and just kind of simmered in. And that's really my jam right now. So that's going to be a fun one. Tickets are $125. I'll be rolling out another date for the third dinner, which I think is going to be on the second to last day of all of summer. Okay. So probably September 21st, but y'all stay tuned for that. Okay. Sadly, I will have come and gone from Atlanta, so I will not be partaking, but these sound amazing. I can't wait to see, the photos and folks' reactions. This has been a great conversation. I will ask you one last question, just to wrap us up. With all of the different areas you've talked about and the different lanes, within the culinary landscape that you've touched, is there one that you think has given you the most room to share the heart of who you are? Man. Oh, wow. Am I going to cry? Aww. Are you going to make me cry? You can. Okay. So I think, the heart of who I am to date, I think has shown up primarily in With Love and Butter. I think just by the very nature of what it is, right? I'm literally talking like from my childhood things all the way up and through my relationship with love as it exists right now. But it's actually interesting because I think what I've learned in all of this, the most that I've learned has been from the Maillard, and my heart for service and for developing people. I have a client right now. She's my second client. I haven't formally launched the agency yet. It launches on my birthday, August 13th. So look out for that too. Yes. But I have found that the way that people have been drawn to me to execute their ideas has been the clearest indicator from the world, the universe, from God to me about who I am and like what my purpose in the world of food is, which is to produce. I love to produce. I love to help somebody believe in their idea and then crystallize that idea and then put a shot list and a storyboard around that idea and then get them through the filming day and then make them feel great and understand, that they are that they are talented and that their ideas are like worthwhile. And while, yes, they are paying me to do it, right, it is also like that's a larger function of the microcosm of the way I move through the world. A lot of what I do is just like validating people. And I think I used to have a really kind of loaded relationship to that, because who's validating the validator? Right?
That's a good question.
Right? And so I'm now in a place where my cup is so full that it's so easy for me to like pour in the directions of the talent who doesn't know that they're the talent yet. Or, you know, content creators who want to be in the rooms where the things are happening, but maybe they don't have the numbers, and making it easy for them to do it without ever focusing on the numbers. You just want to be great at what you do. I got you. I have a place for you. You know what I mean? Come to the My Art. It's like, come to death row.
Come to death row.
But I feel like that talent development piece is really like where my heart kind of shines the strongest, because I really love just like seeing into people and pulling up stuff to the surface that they didn't know that they had, and making them feel like they are like inconquerable. Like, I can do whatever, and as long as it relates to food, I could probably pull that thing out of you and give you infrastructure and support. And that has been, I think I've just learned so much about myself, even in like these last 2 months, like going from the episode with Morris Chestnut to, I can't tell you who the last two people are yet.
Okay.
But one of them has blue eyes.
Okay.
Okay. So, so going from, you know, that to that, right, with the talent that I'm working with, not the celebrity talent, like the host of the show, her name is Sierra, working with her, and the difference between month one, episode 1 and episode 3, by the time that we had finished that up, I was like, there's no way that you could ever tell me that you hadn't been doing this for years. Right? And like being able to pull that sort of confidence out of her knowing that she can trust me to execute on her vision so that she can just show up and lock in, is really a beautiful thing. And so I feel like in a way I kind of end up becoming the romantic platonic partner to people by way of them trying to execute on their vision.
Yeah.
And it's great. Like, I feel like I've got all of these people who just like I love and I trust, and they trust me back with their babies. Like, I feel like a godmother to like all of these different projects. And I think that that's really what it is. And the maternal nature in me like needs that. I want that. I desire it. I love to see it in other people. I want to blossom it in everybody. So yeah, I think that that's where my heart is right now. And I think that My Art is giving me like the perfect vehicle to kind of show up and lead heart first.
Well, look, I'm here for that. I think it's beautiful. I think a whole agency being set up around helping people bring their dream and what is in them to fruition is so admirable. So I can't wait till August 13th to see it born into the world. Tell folks where they can find out information about the upcoming dinner series and just about all things Courtnee.
Yeah. So best place to keep up with me, hands down, is always going to be on my Instagram, which is at Courtnee Futch. I'm the COURTNEE FUTCH. And so my dinner, all of those details will be there, link in bio. And also all of the ways that you can stay in touch with what the My Art is doing, and also with Love and Butter, because the podcast just had a new episode drop like 2 weeks ago.
Go listen.
Yeah.
Well, I will make sure that I post all of that information with the show notes. But thank you again for talking to me today. I have loved this episode. Courtnee, I met you at the first Black Women in Food Summit. And there was just so many people that I've been able to like keep and build relationships with. So I'm so glad that you were one of those people. Thank you so much. If you're interested in keeping up with me in between episodes, you can find me on Instagram at Hey K in the Bay. That has been this week's episode of the As Told by a podcast from the ATL. I will see y'all on the next one.